Good morning, sir. Yes, sir.
Morning, sir.
Okay, okay. So today we will speak about malaria. So just a minute. So malaria, it's commonly caused by Plasmodium falciparum, and the other ones which can cause are Plasmodium vivax, ovale, Plasmodium malaria, and novel C. Though the commonest infections are by vivax and falciparum. And you would have gone through that pathophysiology and all in your second year. So we'll go mostly into the clinical features and the treatment part, which is more important in medicine rather than the pathophysiology part. So the patients after the infection mostly present with the following clinical features, of which the febrile paroxysms are the most common, along with the rigors, headache, abdominal pain, nausea, vomitings, the muscle pains, the lack of sense of well-being, the paroxysm abates, diaphoresis, and the fatigue. So, though all these may not be present in all the patients, most of them will be seen, and the most common is the febrile paroxysms and the rigors. That is the most common clinical features that you will be seeing in almost all the patients. So, a patient with falciparum malaria, apparently not seriously ill, may develop dangerous complications. What is the dangerous complication? That is the cerebral malaria. So, cerebral malaria is the most grave complication and is manifested either by confusion or coma, usually without any localizing signs. So, when the children are affected, then they can die rapidly without any special symptoms other than fever. So, you will be seeing only febrile paroxysms in a child, and then suddenly child might be dying. So, one of the most common causes is malaria, and most commonly seen in these malarial endemic regions. And immunity is impaired inside of the placenta is also frequent. And whenever the splenectomy is done, any splenectomized patients, the risk of severe malaria is more. So I'll come again. Though we see so many clinical features and all, there is also a chance of very dangerous complications. Cerebral malaria is one of the most grave complication. So in this patient may present only with confusion or coma, that is with fever, and usually there may not be any localizing signs. So without any other CNS involvement to examine, there may not be any localizing signs, and the patient may present with coma along with when it's seen, it's die rapidly without any symptoms. So how exactly Plasmodium vivax and the ovale infections present? So in these cases, many of them they start with fever, that is several days of continuous fever before the development of classical bouts of fever on alternate days. So normally you will be seeing this alternate day fever, but before that, previously, there will be several days of continuous fever, and the fevers are associated with rigors. So the patient feels cold and the temperature rises to about 40 degrees Celsius. So after half an hour to an hour, hot or flushed face begins. So if you can see, the patient first has fever and then followed by the hot or flushed face being begin. And in the it lasts for several hours and gives way to profuse perspiration and gradual fall in temperature. So basically, normally we would be seeing a alternate fever, that is tension or quaternion fever. But in the early stages, when the illness, you will be seeing several days of continuous fever, and this fever is associated with rigors. So earlier, the fever it will rise up to 40 degrees Celsius, and then slowly it comes down, giving rise to profuse perspiration and then gradual fall in the temperature. So now this cycle is again repeated 48 hours later. Gradually, the spleen and the liver start to enlarge and may become tender as the RBCs tend to break. Slowly it depends, and it slowly leads to the spleen and the liver enlargement, and they become tender. So the anemia also slowly develops. The herpes simplex infection is most common, and the relapses are frequent in the first 2 years after leaving the malarious area. So you can see in the Plasmodium vivax and ovale, the cycle is repeated every 48 hours and gradually leads to spleen and liver enlargement as the RBC cells tend to break, and the anemia also develops as a result, and the relapses may be seen even after 2 years. And how exactly is Plasmodium malariae infection is seen? This is usually associated with mild symptoms and the bouts of fever every third day. So there you will be seeing every alternate day. Here you will be seeing it every third day. And the parasitemia may persist for many years without the occasional recurrence of fever or without producing any symptoms. So this is an important point here. Though there may not be any symptoms and signs, the parasitemia may persist for many years in the Plasmodium malaria infection. And this Plasmodium malaria causes glomerulonephritis and the nephrotic syndrome in the children. So the symptoms are seen every third day. That is, fever is seen every third day, and the symptoms are very mild. And the parasitemia may persist for many years without any symptoms, and it leads to mostly glomerulonephritis and nephrotic syndrome in the children. So here you can see. Here you can see. As we could see, when the patient organ involvement in severe malaria, there will be decreased levels of consciousness and the cerebral edema. And the jaundice, as the hepatic involvement is seen, and the hepatomegaly, and as the RBC cells tend to break, you will be seeing jaundice due to the hepatic involvement. There will be splenomegaly, there will be metabolic acidosis, and there will be oliguria and acute renal failure. And when the respiratory system is involved, there will be respiratory acidosis, anemia due to hemolysis, and acute respiratory distress syndrome, that is ARDS, is seen. And the pulmonary edema and the cardiac failure will be seen secondary to the anemia. And there will be hepatomegaly, and there will be oozing from the puncture sites, that is bleeding diastasis. It is caused due to low platelet count and poor clotting factor production. So the organ involvement in severe malaria will come again. When you talk about the CNS system, the central nervous system, there will be decreased level of consciousness. The patient may end up in coma and ultimately lead to death. There would be cerebral edema. The jaundice would be seen as a hepatic involvement is seen. There will be hepatomegaly. And then on the respiratory system involvement, there would be respiratory acidosis due to ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, and there would be pulmonary edema and ultimately cardiac failure, and there would be splenomegaly, and on the renal involvement, there would be oliguria and the renal failure. That is, acute renal failure will be seen, and there would be oozing from the puncture sites due to bleeding diastasis caused by low platelet count and poor clotting factor production. So these are the organ involvements in the severe malaria, which you would normally not be seeing when there is a mild infection. As it progresses, then you'd be seeing all the organs involvement and very severe complications. So how does the paroxysm occurs? The paroxysms, as you seen in the Plasmodium vivax and ovale, it could be tertian every 48 hours or quaternarian in the Plasmodium malaria. And it's a very high fever we will be seeing in the malaria, that is up to 105 Fahrenheit. And the rigors and profuse sweats characterize the paroxysms. So it's an important point. The rigors and the profuse sweats are the characteristics of the paroxysm, and the rigors usually may last 10 to 30 minutes. And the paroxysms are most common in Plasmodium vivax, ovale, and others. So as the temperature keeps on increasing, the episodes of the rigors also keeps on increasing, and it may last up to 10 to 30 minutes. And it's more common in Plasmodium vivax and ovale than the others, and such as falciparum, malaria, or novelty. It's more common in vivax and ovale. And the periodicity of the fever and symptoms may be irregular. Those who have less anti-malarial immunity, that is the travelers to the endemic areas, or the accidental inoculation of blood from the infected patient, or the transfusion related. In them, you won't be seeing the paroxysm as at the regular intervals. They may be at the irregular intervals also. So here you can see normally a continuous irregular fever, not tertian. The disease may be rapidly fatal if not treated. Normally you'll be seeing a regular tertian or quaternion fever, but if you are seeing continuous irregular fever, it means that the disease may be rapidly fatal if not treated. So then as you give the anti-malarial treatment, the temperature comes down. Here you can see it was around up to 40 and all, then they started treatment, and you see one bout after one day, and gradually the temperature being coming down. This is of the falciparum, Plasmodium falciparum malariae. So how do you want to examine and what do you want to do? As the patient comes to you, you want to physically examine whether patient is in tachycardia, that is secondary to fever, the anemia, which also leads to tachycardia, and then the orthostatic hypotension, the anemia, the splenomegaly, it may be tender, and mild hepatomegaly, jaundice, abdominal tenderness, and musculoskeletal pains. This is what you will be examining when you are suspecting a malarial patient. Tachycardia, when there is a febrile paroxysm or when the temperature is high, you will be seeing the raise in the pulse rate. So that is tachycardia is seen along the and also due to the anemia. There would be orthostatic hypotension, anemia, pallor would be seen, the splenomegaly, mild hepatomegaly, the jaundice, the abdominal tenderness, and the musculoskeletal pains. So severe malaria would be just severe malaria, cerebral malaria or severe malaria, that is unarousable coma. So it's a severe normocytic normochromic anemia, that is HP of less than 5 grams with normocytic normochromic, that is severe anemia, and hematocrit of less than 15% would be seen. And ultimately it may lead to pulmonary edema. And there is a hypoglycemia, that is blood sugars of less than 40 milligrams, and the circulatory collapse, that is hypotension due to systolic blood pressure less than 50 mmHg, and the spontaneous bleeding and disseminated intravascular coagulation is also seen, and repeated generalized convulsions and acidemia, that is acidosis as we were speaking, a pH of less than 7.25 and a bicarbonate less than 15 milliequivalents per liter, that is a metabolic acidosis will be seen, and the malarial hemoglobinuria, and that is not drug induced. So how what you would be seeing in a severe malaria, that is a cerebral malaria case, then that is an unarousable coma. You would be seeing a normocytic normochromic anemia with a hemoglobin of less than 5 and hematocrit of less than 15, a pulmonary edema, and the hypoglycemia when the blood sugars are less than 40, and the circulatory collapse, that is a systolic blood pressure of less than 50. And as we are speaking, there would be bleeding diastasis due to the decreased platelet count and poor function of the clotting factor. So this will lead to spontaneous bleeding and disseminated intravascular coagulation and repeated generalized convulsions. And there would be metabolic acidosis with a pH of less than 7.25 and a plasma bicarbonate of less than 15 milliequivalents per liter. And there would be malarial hemoglobinuria. And the coma is manifest as diffuse symmetric encephalopathy, and the neck stiffness and photophobia is absent to differentiate it with other things like meningitis, and eyes may be divergent, disconjugate gaze may be present, and corneal reflexes are preserved. So this is an important point. Here you can see the eyes may be divergent with a disconjugate gaze, but the corneal reflexes are preserved. So whenever you are examining a patient and you are thinking the patient is in coma, and you find this with a disconjugate gaze and the corneal reflex preserved and the history of fever, then you can suspect cerebral malaria. And the tendon reflexes are variable, abdominal and cremastic reflexes are absent, and there is a fixed jaw closure and tooth grinding, that is bruxism, are common. So patient may present with coma, which may manifest as diffuse symmetric encephalopathy, and there would be no neck stiffness and no photophobia to differentiate with meningitis, and the eyes may be divergent, that is a disconjugate gaze may be present with corneal reflexes preserved. So this is an important point to be remembered in cerebral malaria. And there is a decerebrate rigidity and decorticate rigidity may also occur. The retinal hemorrhages may be seen, and when you take for the CSF is normal and non-specific ECG abnormalities may be noted. And the other complications of the neurological complications would be psychosis, encephalopathy, tremors, and cerebellar dysfunction. And very rarely, cranial nerve palsies may occur. So, decerebrate rigidity is also seen, and retinal hemorrhages may also be seen. So, here you can see multiple retinal hemorrhages, though this image is not that clear. So, here you can see that the disc conjugate gaze so you can see the optic axis are not in parallel in vertical and horizontal planes, so they are not parallel, the optic axis. You can see disc conjugate gaze, this is how the patient with the disc conjugate gaze would be seen as. So it's seen in mostly in cerebral malaria, but the corneal reflex is always preserved, so that is a very important point. And here you can see decerebrate rigidity in a patient with cerebral malaria and also having hypoglycemia. So this is how the decerebrate rigidity, something that we would have learned in first year in physiology. The decerebrate rigidity, this is how the patient will present as. And convulsions in a child, note the deviation of eyes to the left. And there was, so the raising, stereotyped and left arm. This is how sometimes the patient could present as in children, with the deviation of the eyes and nystagmus and the raising corner of the mouth here, and the raising of the left arm, that is subtle convulsions in a child with cerebral malaria. So this I just want to show the disconjugate gaze here. So this is how the disconjugate gaze would be present in a patient, but the corneal reflexes would be preserved. So anemia is very common in severe malaria. So in non-immune and in areas with unstable transmission, anemia may develop rapidly and may require transfusion. So as we spoke, the severe anemia which we seen, that is a normocytic normochromic with a hemoglobin of less than 5 and hematocrit of less than 15. In the acidosis, the lactic acidosis is commonly coexistent with hypoglycemia and the renal impairment. So as the renal impairment keeps on increasing, the metabolic acidosis in the body keeps on increasing. So the pH would be around 7.25 or less, and the plasma bicarbonate levels are mostly below 15 millimoles per liter. And the patient will have acidotic breathing, often termed as respiratory distress, secondary to the ARDS, and the patient may end up in respiratory acidosis also. And the renal failure, it is an acute oliguric renal failure, or sometimes polyuric, that is, you may call it as non-oliguric renal failure, but mostly it is an acute oliguric, very decreased urine output, acute oliguric renal failure. So there is no improvement with the rehydration, but the serum creatinine levels are mostly less than 3 milligrams per deciliter. And the serum creatinine rises over a period of days until hyperkalemia and uremic complications such as bleeding, pleural or pericardial effusions, and encephalopathy may develop. Also associated with hemoglobinuria, patients with massive hemolysis. So as the renal failure keeps on increasing, patient ends up in with decreased GFR. It will lead to increased potassium in the body and the blood urea, so leading to uremic complications and hyperkalemia. So the secondary to uremia, the uremic complications such as bleeding, pleural or pericardial effusions, and encephalopathy may develop. So serum creatinine, which is normally less than 3, may slowly rise as the disease progresses. And also there would be hemoglobinuria in patients with massive hemolysis, that we would call as black water fever. So it's an oliguric renal failure, and there would be no improvement with the rehydration. And as the disease progresses and the renal failure keeps on increasing, patient may even require dialysis. There is pulmonary edema and acute respiratory distress syndrome. It is a non-cardiogenic, often aggravated by overhydration. So as the oliguria keeps on increasing, patients are being overhydrated and it may lead to pulmonary edema, and that is non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema and leads to acute respiratory distress syndrome, and may develop in otherwise uncomplicated Plasmodium vivax malaria also. And it develops several days of anti-malarial therapy, and the mortality rate is very high, that is up to 80%. So the point here, the important is it's a non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema, and most oftenly it's aggravated by overhydration. The hypoglycemia, it is when the plasma glucose levels are less than 40 milligrams per deciliter, and it's associated with poor prognosis. And the physical signs are sweating, goose flesh, tachycardia may be present. Tachycardia may be absent and may be difficult to distinguish. And the hypotension with shock may be associated, and the systolic BP is less than 80 mmHg in the adults. So the orthostatic hypotension or the circulatory failure will be seeing in the cerebral malaria where the systolic BP is less than 50. But when the patients present with hypoglycemia, they may also present in hypotension with shock where the systolic BP is less than 80 and the plasma glucose levels are less than 40. So normally you would be seeing sweating and goose flesh in the hypoglycemia settings normally in the patients, but here it may be absent, so it would be very difficult to distinguish. So what are the prognostic indicators? So deep coma, marked agitation, hyperventilation, respiratory distress, hypothermia, hypoglycemia, bleeding, repeated convulsions, anuria, and shock. These are bad prognostic indicators. When these are present, there is a very bad prognosis. So now we go on to the treatment. So anti-malarial drugs in the malaria. So chloroquine is the drug of choice. So chloroquine can be given at 10 mg base per kg IV infusion at a rate of over 8 hours followed by 15 mg per kg over 24 hours. So this is an IV dose for a chloroquine sensitive malaria at a 10 mg base per kg IV infusion at a rate over 8 hours followed by 15 mg over 24 hours or 10 mg per kg daily or nasogastric chloroquine as oral regimen. So this is how the chloroquine would be given. So chloroquine resistant Plasmodium falciparum. So quinine dihydrate chloride would be given at 7 mg per kg and which is infused over 30 minutes followed by 10 mg per kg over 4 hours. This oil will be given for a chloroquine resistant Plasmodium falciparum, a quinine dihydrate chloride at 7 mg per kg infused over 30 minutes followed by 10 mg per kg over 4 hours. And the maintenance dose is 10 mg per kg infused over 2 to 8 hours at 5-hour intervals. And the quinidine, it is given at 10 mg per kg infused over 1 to 2 hours followed by 1.2 milligrams base per kg per hour. So these doses are very important because this is how you will be giving the treatment, and most common questions for you being asked in the recent past about the malaria doses also. And this is one of the most common questions, the chloroquine resistant Plasmodium falciparum. So what you would be giving is quinine dihydrate chlorine and quinidine, and the ECG monitoring should be done whenever you are giving the quinidine or quinine. So what are the artemisinin derivatives? There is an artemether and artesunate. So two drugs, that is artemether will be given at 3.2 milligram per kg start by IM injection followed by 1.6 milligram per kg daily. The artesunate you will be giving 2 to 4 mg kg followed by 1 to 1.2 milligram per kg daily. Or you can give it as artesunate ritocaps at 10 mg per kg daily or articulate suppositories, that is 20 mg per kg at 4-hour interval then daily. So I'll come again. Artemisinin derivatives, that is artemether 3.2 milligram per kg IM injection followed by 1.6 milligram per kg daily, or artesunate, that is 2 to 4 milligram kg start by IV followed by 1.2 mg per kg daily. So three drugs, that is chloroquine resistant Plasmodium falciparum, we will be giving quinine dihydrate or quinidine. and the artemisinin derivatives, that is artemether and artesunate. Or you can given artesunate retocap, that is 10 mg per kg daily, or articulate suppositories, that is 20 mg per kg at 4-hour interval and daily. So chemotherapy of mild Plasmodium falciparum malaria. So mild Plasmodium falciparum is now resistant to chloroquine almost worldwide. So quinine is the drug of choice. And the quinine dihydrochloride or sulfate, 600 milligram salt, that is 10 mg per kg, 8 hourly by mouth, given until the patient is clinically better and the blood is free of parasites. That is, usually takes 3 to 5 days. The dose should be reduced at 12 hourly intervals if quinine toxicity develops. So the regimen should be followed by single dose of sulfadoxine 1.5 gram combined with pyrimethamine 75 milligram. That is 3 tablets of Fansidar. In pregnancy, a 7-day course of quinine alone should be given. So the drug of choice in pregnancy, if they ask, the quinine is a drug of choice. Which is a 7-day course, and the sulfonamide sensitivity is suspected. Quinine may be followed by doxycycline 100 mg daily for 7 days. So whenever there is a sulfonamide sensitivity is suspected, then the quinine should be followed by doxycycline 100 mg daily for 7 days. And the decreased efficacy of quinine has been reported in some areas. So the regimen of the quinine should be followed by sulfadoxime and pyrimethamine combination of drugs. And if sulfonamide sensitivity is seen, then doxycycline should be given. And in pregnancy, a 7-day course of quinine alone should be given. So alternatives to quinine plus Fansidar are atovathone, that is 250 milligrams plus proguanil 100 mg, 4 tablets once daily for 3 days, or artemether 200 mg per daily orally for 5 days, and then mefloquine 500 mg in 2 doses 2 hours apart. So it's a bit tough to remember all this, but it's very important. So mefloquine can occasionally cause alarming neuropsychiatric side effects which can persist for several days due to its plasma half-life of 14 days. So whenever you are giving mefloquine, you should be keeping a track of the patient because there could be neuropsychiatric side effects which can persist for several days because of its half-life. So this combines so currently co-artemether, that is artemether plus lumefantrine, that is, and artesunate plus amlodipine are the most widely used. And the artemisinin drugs are normally combined with other drugs. So what are these other drugs? That is lumefantrine or amlodipine are the most widely used drugs right now. So how do you want to manage the complicated falciparum malaria? So that is a cerebral malaria, and it's assumed when sexual parasites are present in the blood film and the patient has impaired consciousness and other encephalopathies have been excluded. And particularly bacterial meningitis and locally occurring viral encephalitis has been excluded. And the complications of severe malaria include hypoglycemia, severe anemia, renal failure, and metabolic acidosis. So severe malaria should be considered in any non-immune patient with a parasite count greater than 2%. So how exactly do you want to treat it? So the management of severe malaria should include early and appropriate anti-malarial chemotherapy, active treatment of complications, correction of fluid, electrolyte and acid-base balance, and avoidance of harmful ancillary treatments. And quinine is indicated in chloroquine resistant, and there is no still high-grade resistance that precludes its use in severe malaria. So the quinine is given where there is a chloroquine-resistant malaria is being seen, and there is no high-grade resistance that precludes its use in severe malaria. So it can be given. So quinine is given as intravenous infusion over 4 hours. So the treatment should be started with a loading dose of infusion of 20 mg per kg quinine. So in cerebral malaria, the quinine dose is 20 mg per kg of quinine, and up to a maximum of 1.4 grams of quinine can be given over 4 hours. And then after 8 to 12 hours, the maintenance doses are 10 mg per kg quinine up to a maximum of 700 mg. So you'd be starting at 20 mg per kg, and can you go up to 1.4 gram is the maximum dose you can go. That is within 4 hours. And then 8 to 12 hours, the maintenance dose, the 10 mg per kg, and the maximum you can go is up to 700 mg. And this is in cerebral malaria, that is complicated malaria. And it also involves careful attention to all major organ systems. And exchange transfusion has not been tested in randomized control trials, but may be beneficial for non-immune patients with persistent high parasitemia, that is more than 10 circulating erythrocytes. So, Plasmodium vivax, ovale, and malaria infection should be treated with chloroquine, that is 600 mg chloroquine base followed by 300 mg base in 6 hours, then 150 mg base 12 hourly for 2 more days. So this is how the chloroquine is given. 600 mg at start, 300 mg after 2 hours, 300 mg and 300 mg for third day. This is Plasmodium vivax, ovale and malaria. And previously we were speaking about Plasmodium falciparum. So in the Plasmodium falciparum the dose is different, and the malaria, ovale and vivax the dose is different. So you can see the first day, so 600 mg start, and then you will be given 300 mg after 6 hours, and followed by 300 mg for the second day, followed by 300 mg for the third day. And the radical cure of malaria due to Plasmodium vivax and ovale. Relapses can be prevented by taking one of the anti-malarial drugs in suppressive doses. And the radical cure is achieved most patients with a course of primaquine, that is 15 milligrams daily for 14 days, which destroys the hypnozoid phase in the liver. So this is how you'll be giving the primaquine for the 14 days at the dose of 15 mg daily. And the complication for this is there would be hemolysis being developed in G6PD deficient patients. So it's very important that a good history should be taken, and if possible, an examination should be done to rule out the G6PD deficiency, because the primaquine can lead to hemolysis in a G6PD deficient patient. And the dose is 15 mg daily for 14 days, what you will be given for the radical cure of malaria due to Plasmodium vivax and ovale, where there is an hypnozoid phase in the liver has been seen. And the cyanosis due to the formation of methemoglobin in the red cells is more common but not dangerous. So the important point here is, to destroy the hypnozoid phase, we are giving primaquine at the dose of 15 mg daily for 14 consecutive days. And the complication is hemolysis in a G6PD deficient patient. And this is for the radical cure of malaria due to Plasmodium vivax and ovale. And the chemoprophylaxis, the clinical attacks of malaria may be preventable with drugs such as Proguanil, which attack the pre-erythrocytic form, and also by the drugs such as Atovaquone 260 mg plus Proguanil 100 mg, and the doxycycline, the chloroquine or mefloquine, after the parasite has entered the erythrocyte. These are the drugs we discussed previously also. The Proguanil, which attacks the pre-erythrocytic form, and also drugs such as Atovaquone, Proguanil, or doxycyclines, which affect after the parasite has entered the erythrocyte. So, if you want to give a drug which may prevent the malaria before it enters the erythrocytic form, it is Proguanil, and Atovaquone, doxycycline, chloroquine, and mefloquine after the erythrocyte entry. And it's important to determine the degree of risk of malaria in the area to be visited and the degree of chloroquine resistance, because these factors will guide the recommendations for the prophylaxis, and summarized as in the British National Formulary in the UK and similar publications in other countries. And an expert advice is required for individuals unable to tolerate the first-line agents listed or in whom they are contraindicated. And the dosages vary in children depending on the age and the body weight, and the references should be made to standard dosage recommendations. So this is how the treatment is. We'll just go through the drugs once. So the anti-malarial drugs, that is chloroquine, 10 mg per base kg IV infusion over 8 hours, followed by 15 mg per kg over 24 hours in the Plasmodium falciparum. And whenever there is an Plasmodium falciparum resistance to, so the chloroquine is resistant in the Plasmodium falciparum, then you'd be giving quinine dihydrate chloride or quinidine. And whenever you are giving these drugs, and serial ECG monitoring should be done. And there are artemisinin derivatives such as artemether and artesunate. So 3.2 mg per kg is what you will start with, and followed by 1.6 milligram per kg. The artesunate you start at 2 to 4 milligram, followed by 1.2 milligram per kg. So these are the three important ones: chloroquine, quinine, quinidine, the artemisinin derivatives, that is artemether and artesunate. And the management, in the pregnancy, the drug of choice is quinine. So this is an important point. The drug of choice in pregnancy with malaria is quinine, and these should be followed by a sulfadoxine and pyrimethamine combination, that is 3 tablets of Fansidar or any other one, which is a 1.5 gram of sulfadoxine and pyrimethamine of 75 mg. And if there's a sulfonamide sensitivity is seen, then the quinine should be followed by a doxycycline dose of 100 mg daily for 7 days. And the other drugs are such as Torcone and Proguanil, which can also be given. And normally now we are seeing the artemisinin drugs being combined with another drug, that is lumefantrine and amlodipine, the most widely used drugs. And for the Plasmodium falciparum treatment, it's not only treating the parasitic infection, but it's also important that you treat the complications such as the hypoglycemia and the severe anemia, renal failure, and metabolic acidosis. Severe anemia by the transfusion, the blood transfusion; hypoglycemia by giving the dextrose solutions; the renal failures, which sometimes may require the hemodialysis also; and the metabolic acidosis by giving good hydration and bicarbonate infusions. And the quinine is indicated when there is a chloroquine resistance. And the treatment, the dose is different compared to the other one. The quinine dose is at 20 mg per kg is what you will start. That is an infusion dose. And the maximum that you can be giving is 1.4 gram of quinine over 4 hours. And then it's followed by 8 to 12 hours of maintenance dosage at 10 mg per kg of quinine and up to 700 mg. And in the Plasmodium vivax, ovale, and malaria, we will be giving 600 mg of chloroquine at start, which is followed by 300 mg after 6 hours, and 300 mg after second day, and 300 mg after the third day. And for the radical cure, you will be giving primaquine in only Plasmodium vivax and ovale, because here you will be seeing hypnozoite phase in the liver, so which is being destroyed by the primaquine, and the dose is 15 mg daily for 14 days. And the most common complication is hemolysis, which is seen in G6PD deficient patients. So primaquine of 15 mg for 14 days in a Plasmodium vivax and ovale patient to destroy the hypnozoite phase. And the drug that is acting on the pre-erythrocytic form is Proguanil. The other drugs, whichever is there, they act on the erythrocytic phase. So this should be enough for you, and thank you.